getting my system set up now. It looks like I am live streaming. So I need to see a few things. Offline. We're streaming live. Okay. 2 viewers right now, which is me and someone else. So I'm looking at my chat box, expecting a few hours. Looks good. All right. You gotta give it a few minutes before I get started. And if you can, just go ahead and put something on the chat box so I could see who is there. So I'm seeing some more viewers coming up, but I'm actually looking to, I've got my pad on my one side here so I could kind of see from my pad any chat. And then I also have like another just page up on my email, because before I had someone email me a question I couldn't see, so I have to kind of go between the presentation, the emails, and all that. So I want to make sure I got everybody represented and I can reach everybody. So I can also on my pad here put on my email. So while we're waiting, we're still getting some more viewers. And welcome. I got that pad up. Okay, no questions there. Good deal. So we got 2 broadcasts. It says live. It's got me down. Let's do that so you can see me better. All right. Good deal. Looks like I got enough. I'm going to get started. So, welcome. If you do have any questions, definitely throw it into a live chat box. I do not see anything as of yet, and I do not see anything on my end here. So what I will do though is from time to time I'm going to check my pad, I'll check out my live checkbox, but I might not be able to see it right off because I'm going to show you guys my screen with my presentation on there. And you definitely want to go over some of the job safety analysis that some people have sent me. I had a few that have sent me some job safety analysis. So I'm looking through those and I'm comparing all the different job safety analysis. A lot of people use this, so that's great, but there's still some that don't use it yet. And to me, I think it's one of the greatest tools that you could use to help your workers kind of visualize the job that they need to do, and step by step. So that's the SOP part, standard operating procedure. But then beyond that, everyone's got to figure out, okay, what is the hazard related to this step, and then how do I control it? So this is going to be an overview just to get you a good idea, and then I want to set a good time for questions and answers too. So if there are any questions or answers, I will be available for that. Let me check behind me too, because I do have my phone. So from time to time, I'll get someone that may text a question. So nothing more. I am 100% connected to you guys now. So we got the phone, we got the pad, I'll check the email just to make sure I get all questions. I don't want to miss any this time from what I had last time. So let's get to sharing my screen. And I'm going to share my presentation. So my dashboard, uh, the entire screen. I'm looking for the application version. So I'm going to try it this way first. And let's see if you see this. So you should be looking at my PowerPoint presentation. So judging from it's a little delay on my actual screen here. One thing I do need is how's the volume? I don't know how that is. So if you guys are having some volume issues, just let me know if the volume is good or not. I'm going to turn up the volume a little here. Just I might get some feedback. Okay, excellent. All right, no feedback on my end, so good deal. Job safety analysis. This is a presentation I did a little while back on just the effectiveness of the job safety analysis. I call it the bloodline of the safety and health program. It's truly that part of the safety and health program where it's, if you were to think of it as boots on the ground, where you're actually getting the workers to engage in everything that they would need for the safety and health program. So if they're engaged, that means that them themselves are doing this work, that they are thinking ahead of what hazards are there and what they need to do to fix a hazard. So that is why I named it the lifeline of the safety and health, bloodline of the safety and health program. So that's me. You guys are been seeing, I guess, a whole bunch of me. I've been trying to keep up with the newsletters and then the notice, because a lot of people, when I do a presentation, they ask, what's going on? How can I find out a little bit more about occupational safety? So that's what I started in just response to all my live people that have been asking. So here's our overview. Go over some of the hazards. Going to go over some of the hazard types. Then we'll find out how to control the hazards using the JSA, and I'll say JHA as you see there as in the hazards, and then I'll also say JSA. It's the exact same thing. So if I switch from S to H, and that's okay, cut me some slack, so, but I will be doing that job hazard or safety analysis just interchangeably. The overview, I'll show you guys through the OSHA guidance of the JHA process and then how to implement it. And then I added a couple things about risk assessment, behavioral-based safety, and then we'll wrap it up with some Q&As. The hazard type itself is a very interesting thing to try to make sure that you are aware of all the different hazard types. I use OSHA's guidance on hazard types. So what I would like to show you guys after we get a little bit in is I'm going to show you where to find some of these things on OSHA's website. So I'm going to show you my browser and we'll go through that. So a hazard itself, any condition or behavior that if left uncontrolled can cause potential injury or illness to the worker or create organizational losses. And then the ultimate question is, if the hazard exists, will there be an accident? I hear this, I pose this question to my students in several of my classes, and I get a lot of, yes, hazards will be there, and hazards mean that you're going to have yourself a big accident, and things are going to be huge, and they're going to have such a loss. And then I have the other side of the class that they're thinking, well, not always if you have an accident, you're going to have yourself, I should say a hazard, you're going to have yourself an accident. So the truth is this, there's an equation here that you need to think of. And the hazard is only a portion of this equation. The hazard is the big part of the equation if it was weighed in any way, but the hazard itself does not create the accident. You need exposure to that hazard. And exposure could be something as simple as someone just walking by, or they could be in an enclosed area with the hazard, or they could actually be walking underneath the hazard. Whatever that hazardous situation is, the worker needs to be exposed to it, or else you will not have an accident. So, in theory, the hazard can be controlled or eliminated with elimination of, well, I should say, the hazard and exposure. You could either address the exposure side or you address the hazard side. So exposure side, you could take your people away from the hazard and you won't have an incident. If it's on the hazard side, you could either remove the hazard altogether or you control it with the three types of controls we'll talk about: engineering, administrative, and PPE controls. So as you're looking at this uh, slide right here, for OSHA, they actually have something called their Safety Pays program. I have a link there, but I broke it down a little bit more outside of the link. And this is basically what the hazard types are labeled. There's a whole bunch of these, so I just broke down three so you can see. Chemical hazard could be a toxic chemical, it could be a corrosive chemical. Ergonomic issue could be some spasms or a sprain, or some type of issue where you have, a back or repetitive motion. That would be another type of ergonomics hazard. So with the chemical hazard, number one is saying the description of that hazard is a chemical that causes illness and disease to the body. And truly, that's one of the things that you really would have to think about in that type of hazard is what is the back issue going to be, meaning, once you get exposed, what's the trickle down effect, I should say, going to be with this chemical hazard. So once you get the hazard type down, now you can really start dealing with the control for this hazard. And you have to understand all the different components of the hazard in order for you to start controlling it. So these hazard types are important for you. There's the safety pays that I started showing you earlier. And the safety pays program through OSHA is this. They have come up with this other organization, and this organization is the NCCI, National Compensation something. I might have it up there, but all these acronyms, they're pretty daunting when you start thinking about it. But that is one of the actual organizations that work with OSHA to get this thing going. So the NCCI and OSHA has 3 years worth of history. And with this history, they could actually figure out some of these costs for the accident, and it's an average cost. So what I did is I broke down the direct versus indirect costs of an accident. So some of the direct costs of an accident is something that's easily identifiable, something that for sure you're going to see. You can get a quote on something like you're paying 2 workers to go down to the clinic. So therefore, that is a direct cost, easily quantifiable. The next one is an indirect cost, not as easily quantifiable, but it is a cost that you could see later down the line, or it'll make itself apparent. Now, if you lose customers, you may never see that, but you could see some productivity issues later on. So that is one of the actual indirect costs of an accident. So the NCCI, I got up there, National Council of Compensation Insurance. So the 3-year history, the 3% profit margin, meaning 3 cents out of the dollar is going to pay for this injury. So I've got a back strain here, so 3 years worth of data. The average total cost of a back strain, not just one attempt, one check that's going to be written. It's a little amount here and there, or a lot amount here, a lot amount there, but total, it's expected on average to cost the company $70,000 for that one issue. So therefore, at 3 cents out of the dollar, you're going to have to make an additional $2.3 million to cover that accident. So that's big, big money. And if you could use a tool like the job safety analysis, you could actually remove the worker from the hazard, or you can identify the hazard correctly through a hazard type, and then you can control it. So that is some of the things behind it. And so our safety guy here is having a rough time with all the accidents on their manufacturing floor. So he needs to find a better way. So how is he gonna find that better way of protecting himself? I love that for sure. And that it's I've when I was in the field, sometimes I had that feeling of, oh my, what am I gonna do next? It's crazy. So I saw that and I kind of related to that picture there. So how do you control your hazards? So that is a big issue. So we'll talk a little bit about that before we get into the process of the job safety analysis. So how do you control these hazards? First is engineering control. You're creating, or it's built in, a physical guard, a block, something that is going to protect your worker from the hazard. You may actually have a control center on one side and the point of operation on the other side of where the worker is. So if that's the case, or you actually have the worker away from the hazard, you engineered that out. You engineered a way for you to protect your worker. The administrative controls are your work rules. So that is the big old thou shalt not touch this machine without putting the guard on. Or let's take a little rotation in our job so not the one person isn't going to get wore out or tired or something to that effect. So those are some of your administrative rules. And the PPE, last line of defense, unfortunately, most people go to PPE first. So if I told somebody who's working on a roof and the roof could accommodate guardrails and the company has the guardrails with them, then I would think that they would want to go for the guardrails first. But mostly we hear, let's go ahead and throw on that personal fall rest system, find our anchor point or lifeline, and then let's do it that way. That control is last line of defense, thinking the control should be initially uh, base your engineering first. That's going to block the worker from getting injured. Then your admin, then your PPE. So those are, it's a hierarchy. It's tiered that way. It's easier to implement something like PPE. However, the effectiveness of just PPE is far less. So this is a nice little picture I found. Unfortunately, I can't remember where, so you might have to look up on Google a hierarchy of controls and find this diamond so you could get the source on that. But the elimination portion is top quintessential. It's hardest to implement. However, that's what you want to do. If you need to substitute it, then yes, you could get someone to do this job instead of your guys, and then you pretty much contracted it out. But now if you have to deal with it, then you have your engineering control, then your admin controls as being your other two lines of defense. So I like this pyramid. I like the way this actually works out pretty good. Any questions before we get onto the hazard assessment? You can actually see the think stock on this picture so you know where it is. So I've got my pad on the left. Yeah, so I will take a quick look to see if there's any other questions. So you might see the presentation leave for a second. But what I'm doing is just checking, making sure I got everybody covered with any questions. So any questions that we have so far with this portion? Excellent. It looks like we're good. Most people get the hazard assessment, the hazard types, knowing about the PPE and engineering controls. It's just really when you want to get that message to your workers, sometimes it becomes a little bit different, a little difficult there. So let's go back and show you that next part of the presentation. So now we're up to the hazard assessment portion. So a hazard assessment must be made, especially if you're in general industry. So construction versus general industry, the difference is general industry is where you're maintaining something. You're not building it for the first time. You're not renovating it. It's just a maintenance. That is your general industry. You'll see service as being general industry. Uh, let's see. Construction is something, you know, where you're building it for the first time, or it's a high dollar figure renovation. Maintenance is if you're, uh, let's say you have to do some work and it's routine type work, but you're exposed to height, like changing out a filter for an air handling unit. So yes, you're on the same roof as someone who's doing roofing, but you're in general industry because you're doing more of a maintenance type job as opposed to someone who's repairing a roof. So you are both on the same location, but you have two different standards. The guy who's doing roofing is going to be under Part 1926 in construction, but the guy who's doing the maintenance is on 1910 general industry rules. So though they're on the same surface, they're actually under two different type of regulations. So the general industry side says that there by law in 1910 subpart I, you actually have, and I believe it's like 134 or 132, 134, one of those, where you actually have to do a hazard assessment, a PPE hazard assessment. So if you're telling somebody you have to wear a hard hat to do this job, then that person doing the job, you have to make sure you're picking the proper hard hat for them. Or if you're going to have a respirator, then you're picking the correct respirator. And the way you do that is through a PPE hazard assessment. So OSHA has deemed that that is a requirement for general industry. And not only is it a requirement, but you have to have a certificate. And that certificate must read that you have conducted a PPE hazard assessment. So if that's going to be one of your controls in your job safety analysis, you have to make sure that you've done that. So that's a requirement. So this is one of the hazard assessment. I use eye protection as just as something you can see here. So eyes protection, if you're using primary protectors, your actual goggles, then that means you have to have said to your workers, I did the assessment and you're going to be exposed to impact. You're going to be exposed to heat or dust or any of those things. Therefore, you need this. So if it was impact, you'll have a Z, a Z guidance on your impact. I believe what's the 359 or I can't remember the Z guidance on your ANSI guidance. Uh, anyway, your eyes. I think it's 359, and you need the plus for impact. Then if it's dust, you'll see the D, and then if it's nuisance dust or fine dust, you're going to see like a D5 or a D6, depending on how coarse the dust is. You must have done that hazard assessment before you told your workers that this is what you need. So for every piece of equipment that you are giving to your workers, especially after you do your job safety analysis, you should have had a hazard assessment that you're giving them the right piece of equipment for them. So I just wanted to let you know that was your requirement, especially in general industry. So now, what is the job safety analysis or the job hazard analysis? So this is really what it is. OSHA's got a little guidance here, and that is OSHA 3071. So if you go to publication 3071, you will see their guidance on the job hazard analysis. So the following pictures that you'll see from here are screenshots from this job hazard analysis, just to give you an idea of what they constitute as being a good one. There's so many different, like I began to tell you in the beginning, a lot of people have developed different types of job safety analysis. So one of the things that you will see is this is a generic basic type one, but your company may actually have something even better, more specific. So there's one, a JSA on the grinding. It's a little step more, or actually it's a lot step more than your standard operating procedure, because your standard operating procedure is just telling you how to do the job. That's it. So where the JSA takes over is now it's telling you how to do this job safely as it's itemized per line, per step on the job. So it's very important that when you're doing this job hazard analysis, that it's a tool for everyone to be involved in, and that you're going to make it specific enough for the workers to understand the hazard, but not every single step of the job, like walk out, grab wrench, okay, pick up wrench, put wrench in toolbox. That's too much. Let's just go ahead, grab our tools, and get ready for the site. So that's a step. And then the hazards relating to that may be some ergonomic issues, or maybe it's a slip, trip, or fall, depending on what your tool room looks like. So that might be a better way of doing it. So the why behind the JHA, get that employee participation. You know you should be going towards a safety culture. So with a safety culture, that goes beyond compliance, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but a safety culture beyond compliance means you got to get your workers involved. So in order to get them involved, get them participating, get them to think, what's the hazard associated with my job? The JSA or JSA is a wonderful thing that you're going to really use to start getting your workers thinking about the hazards. It's going to increase productivity because everybody's going to be on the same page now, and they're going to feel safe as they're working. So it's a good component to protect your workers from incident, as well as it's a good component to help you personally get through any of those situations where people feel stuck on their job and they don't feel that it's safe, and their mind isn't on safety culture anymore. You grab some JSAs and say, let's revisit this. Or if we haven't done any JSAs before, let's start this now, and get them engaged in it. So that's a good tool for that. Here's the overview of the OSHA guidance on this. And there's several different ways to do it, but this is, again, the basics. And they're going over it step by step. And this is grinding iron casting. So you see the guy in the picture, he's got a grinder in front of him. He's grabbing the casting from one side, and that's his raw side. He'll do his grinding, and then he'll put it on the other side as he's complete. Yes, I know what you're thinking. He's not wearing his safety glasses, or he may not have his face shield, but we'll get past that, and we'll just go in for the actual process of doing a JSA. So here's the task. Reach into the metal box. Yeah, he doesn't have some gloves on. So that's another thing I always hear. So you're going to reach into the metal box to the right of the machine. You're going to grasp the casting, carry it to the wheel, push the casting against the wheel to grind off the burrs, and then you're going to place the casting in the box to the left of the machine. So that's the overview of the task. So step one, they're saying, is make sure that it's detailed enough, give you a clear thing, that you're a clear hazard control plan. So location is the metal shop. Joe's safety is doing the analysis. And the task one, worker reaches into a metal box in the right of the machine, grasps a 50-pound casting, carries it to the grinding wheel. Worker grinds 20 to 30 casting per hour. So just by that job description, it's telling you that there are a few things that's happening. If they're grabbing iron, it's metal, so therefore they might need to, especially if there's burrs on it, grinding, it should have some gloves, should have some glasses. So you're thinking that, but it's not on the sheet yet. So it's kind of giving you a little precursor per the job of what some of these steps will occur. So the hazard description, picking up the casting with the employee could drop it on their foot. The casting weight and height seriously injure the worker's foot and toes. So therefore, remove the casting from the box and place them on the table next to the grinder. Wear your steel-toed shoes. Here's your controls. And so they're putting the number one is just to protect them from the heavy casting, especially if you're saying 20 to 30 of these per hour. Then you're wearing your shoes to protect it. Then you're going to have protective gloves for a better grip. And then use a device to pick up the casting. That's another way of making sure you're going to protect your worker's hand. That hand safety is using that device. So that's their first step. Second step is they're going to focus on the laceration part. So they describe the job again. The hazard for the job is the laceration, basically by the sharp burrs, and then this is how they're going to control the laceration. So cut resistant gloves, everything. So this JSA is being done by each task and each step. So they're actually picking up the hazards first, uh, as opposed to picking out the steps first. So you can see the task is one complete thing, and then they're giving you the description for the hazard for that one complete task, and then they're giving you the controls. So that's one way of doing it. I've seen it a different way. So let's say step one could be the worker picking up the actual piece of casting. So picking up the casting, that itself could be twisting and bending hazard, lifting awkwardly. And so you're going to lift properly. You're going to train them on that. So the next thing would be, next step after you're picking up the cast is you're going to start putting it on a grinder. So that step itself is where you're going to break down the hazard for that step, and then putting the finished ground cast into the other side of the box. It's probably going to be closer to the same hazard as picking it up. So you're going to have to, evaluate that. That's the way to break it down. I've seen so many of these JSAs. I've seen a bunch where you have JSAs where people are not only looking at the jobs, looking at the hazard, they got check boxes for all the controls you're going to need. If you're going to need a PPE here, they'll check off that. If you're going to need training, they'll check off the training. And did you have the training? Who conducted the training? And you'll sign off on that. And they even make it very, very important to have all those different components thought about, and everyone's checking them off. They have them in triplicate copies, so you can pull off one copy for the worker, one copy for the safety officer, one copy that stays in a book that's always with them. So that is two different ways of doing the job safety analysis. So when you are, however you decide to do it, first thing you want to do, you want to get uh, those job safety analysis back and analyze them. So once you analyze them, and it'll be great to analyze them as a work team. So some people do it every single day, every single task. That's wonderful. That's the way it should be done. The other area is what is happening when you get them back. Do you evaluate? Do you see if there's something that needs to be changed? Can you have your workers tell you about it so that they now could feel free to discuss what the job was, how they felt, if it needs to be any change? Those are the things that you're going to go through when you're looking at those JSAs as they're coming back. So how do you decide what gets a JSA? So you look at some of your past injuries. If you're having a lot of hand issues, you may actually have to go through your facility and start looking at how workers place their hands on things, and or identify jobs that are more hazardous for hand injuries, and then start addressing those jobs by giving them JSAs. If you get near miss reports, those are wonderful to have. Near miss report is this: I may have dropped something from a ladder, and I almost hit my partner down below. So we're going to write up a nice near miss report of saying this is what happened. It wasn't an accident, but it could have been an accident, and this is the suggestion. We have to make sure it doesn't happen again. So that's what you would do in a near miss report. Or a good catch is one of those where even before it gets to a near miss, you're going to have someone send you a report and saying, man, I just saw this hazard. No one's ever dealt with it, and I really feel that this needs to be done. It could hurt someone in the future. Those are some things, near miss and good catches, that you might want to incentivize. So if you're currently doing some incentives with how many days you hadn't had an accident, if you could switch to maybe near miss or good catches, that's a better way, because now you're getting your workers to look for hazards and bringing them to you. Then you could remove those hazards through the job safety analysis, through other safety concerns, some things you could do. So that's And a side thought, the risk analysis here that you're seeing is if you deal with risk managers much or you're a risk manager yourself, this type of risk analysis is something that a safety officer can do. You can look through the probability, meaning if I'm going to do this job, how frequent in whatever time, 1 out of 50, 1 out of 100, 1 out of 250, am I going to have an incident? Am I going to have an accident if I do this job? Then, if there is an incident or there is an accident, how bad is it going to be? And that's where you get your other side, and that's the severity scale. So it could be something negligible or something catastrophic. I see the numbers here as 1 catastrophic, negligible as 4, or probability, high probability, frequent probability is a, and if it's something you can eliminate altogether and not deal with it, then that's an F. So you want to see a lot of F tasks, but E4, D4, C4, very low risk jobs. You don't really need a JSA for those yet. It's good to have them, but if you got a few A1 jobs, B2 jobs, C1, C2, those jobs there on that chart is telling you, all right, we got to either evaluate our JSAs on those or I'm going to have to create one. So I'm going to give you guys take a quick look at this one. So take a look at this. This is my picture that I took. It's a mess. It's quite a mess. One site, there's actually 3 of these sites. These guys were ripping off some tile and they're actually some roofing material so that they could go back and put on the new roofing material. And there are 9 of these guys on this site, and then on this apartment actually. And then there were 2 others like this. So they did not do a job safety analysis, and even worse, as you can see, a bunch of them have a full body harness on, no lifeline, no anchoring. I talked to the guy on the site, and he said OSHA's not going to pay their bills if they fall off that roof with the lifelines and then they get injured. So that to me is a willful. That's one of those willful type violations. And on top of that, he's putting his guys into imminent danger. That is someone who needs job safety analysis. He probably didn't even need all those guys on the roof. They're trying to get the work done so fast that he didn't think about safety. So that supervisor should be held accountable for doing that job safety analysis. And then the workers need to be trained because their behavior is saying that they have not been trained to that hazard. So when you're done with the risk analysis, you may have to start looking at some of these unsafe behaviors that these tasks that you're doing that are leading to your incidents, leading to your accidents, and you're going to add those things to your job safety analysis. So if you observe, actions like we just saw in that picture, that's telling me I need a job safety analysis. I need some supervision, but I also need a job safety analysis just to make sure that unsafe act does not happen. As you're looking at this pie chart, they're saying that the unsafe acts is 80%. And I've heard some numbers, 85 to 95% of all accidents is unsafe, is by human error. So unsafe conditions is the other 20% in this, but for the most part, it's the act. So I mentioned a couple of times of watching some behaviors before you get to your JSA. There is something called the behavior-based safety model. And this is one of those BBS cards that you see out there. And the behavior-based safety model is just looking at the worker, looking at their position, looking at their hands, looking at everything, and then determining how they score at either safe behavior or at-risk behavior. So this is an example from a company that does that best card, but there's several of these examples. This one is coming from Liberty Mutual, and Liberty Mutual is a wonderful resource site for you, but they say that a safe climate versus a climate where workers don't feel safe. You can see on that line going down that the safety culture will lead to less DOT injury rates, in this case out of 8 companies, when the workers feel that there is a safety culture, there is a safety climate. Something as easy as a job safety analysis could lead your workers to think, all right, we got some safety mindsets here. We got some safety people that are going to do something. And so that is one of the things that really helps. So I mentioned safety culture a bunch of times. OSHA has a guidance now to help you get into that. They have a 7-part series or checklist, if you will. And management leadership is number 1. You got to have that. If management's not involved, you're definitely not going to have yourself a safety culture. Worker participation, that's what you got here with a job safety analysis. You do those analysis, you will have worker participation because you're showing them that you care. Hazard identification, hazard assessment, that is the job hazard analysis by definition. Then your prevention, your controls, education and training. You do an evaluation of your program, make sure everything's working well. And then you also do if you do have a multi-worker site, you coordinate with those people and make sure that they're safe to your standards or greater. And OSHA does have a guidance for safety culture. This is the first thing that you'll see is that safety pays that I showed you about first, and then you'll work your way down to the management system. It does how to integrate management. And then the next thing is a little checkup of how well you're doing in safety. And then after the checkup, then the last thing is how do you actually affect the change on your culture? So that is a tool. I'm going to see if I can bring it up here. No, I don't have that. But I can show you where to get that. So here's the JSA big takeaway. We got a couple of things though that I don't know why I didn't add that. So, oh yeah. All right. So I'm gonna show you a couple of things before we do that wrap up, and I'm gonna also check, make sure everyone's all right. But I gotta show you a couple of things online, so you can do your hazard assessment. So I am going to pull up, where are we? The job safety analysis here. So I just typed in job safety analysis. I could have done job hazard analysis, but it came up and I just clicked on this publication, and that's the one that you were just looking at. So that was the OSHA 3071. But they also have one if you're in the oil and gas field. They do have a job safety analysis for oil and gas specifically. And it's a nice basic principle, same thing we went over. So this is what they have here. And I'm going to show you another thing here. This is Duke University, and they have a PPE hazard assessment certification guidance for you. This hazard assessment certification is a wonderful thing because you could actually look at this thing and it'll give you step-by-step guidance. And this is, the Duke University, the Blue Devils. And you scroll down and they give you an example. Well, actually, this is PDF too. It's a fillable PDF. And then not only is it a fillable PDF, but they give you an example of how to do one of these job safety analysis, or excuse me, PPE assessment and they're doing it by location, by title. So just keep scrolling down, and you even have a place where you sign it, and that is going to make you compliant because it has the words PPE hazard assessment form. And right on the very bottom says PPE hazard assessment certificate. Those are the words that OSHA is looking for you guys to be compliant. So I did mention you need it for compliance. Now I showed you how to get to it. what you would do is you type into a search box like I have here, Duke University Hazard Assessment, and I just did PDF just so I could make sure I found it. So that PDF there is showing me exactly where to go, and that's the form. It's a free form you could use, and just go ahead, download it, use that for your safety system. While we're here, let me show you this one too. I've got a safety culture online, so it's safetyculture.online. So it's not safetyculture.com, it's safetyculture.online. And when you do, this is a membership group that I started. Just wanted to make sure that I made it available to you guys. So I've got several different presentations. I've got classes on this as well. It's a site set up to help you as a safety and health officer, just so you have a few other options. So it is a membership site, so you do have a members area, and they're the ones that can reach some of this. Some testimonials and a few other things there. My blog you can see for free. But the membership site, all you'd have to do is hit join us, and you'll see some of the benefits that you have there, and hopefully you'll be part of this. And my idea for this site is really, it came from doing a whole bunch of conferences. And when you do conferences, sometimes what happens is you bounce some ideas off each other, and then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, we should start a mastermind group, or we should do something where can I call you? Can I email you and get some ideas? I don't know much about this, but you know about that. So that's what this came from. So I was thinking, maybe there's a way I could do this online so that people could have a way of reaching each other. So that's where I came up with the safety culture. And so safetyculture.online if you're interested. And let me give you the wrap up. If I can find it. There we go. Safety culture online. That's me. Okay. I guess I did cover that. So what I am going to do is, now that you got me, please subscribe to the channel too, so you can find out any more about my, if I have any more trainings or anything. You'll see it right on the YouTube channel. It'll like give you a little alert that something's going on. So if you subscribe, it'll help you out. I am going to look and make sure I'm not missing any questions. So if you have any questions, you can type that in for me there. And I'm going to check the pad and make sure I didn't get any emails, because that happened last time. So I'm going to check and make sure there's no emails here of a question I should be answering. So hopefully this has helped you. I don't see any emails and I don't see any questions up there. So if there isn't any questions or emails, then what I'll do is I'm going to send a link out to this for anybody that's already on my email list. You'll see this. Or if you're on my LinkedIn group or my Facebook group, you'll see it on there as well. So you can have this available, and you could use this for your students. And if you're going to teach this, this might be a way you could actually have the lesson going. You can grade some papers or whatever while you're actually teaching the students or engaging them in a different format. It's always good to kind of mix up some of those formats. So anyway, I appreciate it. So again, thank you guys. And if you liked it or you want some more or you have a comment outside of this, then go ahead and just send it to me, and I will definitely reply. It might be through email or it might be through a phone call, but however we do it. So have a wonderful rest of your day, and thanks for spending some time with me.